The nighttime horizon makes a vivid statement. Electric lights, once considered a novelty, over time became a necessity. Today, the electricity that illuminates them also powers nearly every imaginable extension of human endeavor. It is essential to the function and the expectations of contemporary culture. At one time, this scene could not have been imagined. Today, if the lights were not on, something would be terribly wrong.
I've always been privileged to work at KUB. It's an organization that serves this community with essential services. I'm particularly grateful to be here during this 75th anniversary because it gives us an opportunity to reflect upon those who came before us. The men and women of KUB are the strength of the company. We have pipes, wires, we have a lot of equipment, but it's the men and women who understand that it's service to our community and service to our customers that are the reason we exist.
Before the establishment of the Knoxville Utilities Board, KUB, the history of providing basic utilities in Knoxville is colorful. The first public utility was water. Hollow wooden water pipes were first used to transport water from a large spring to downtown. As early as 1837, the city tried to create a waterworks system, but failed, and continued to fail for 40 years. Over that span, Uncle Dick Payne was the only reliable source of drinking water in the city. In 1883, a private venture built 2 large reservoirs to supply their system. On the day it opened for business, one reservoir emptied when a massive sinkhole opened beneath it. The second reservoir suffered the same fate in a matter of days. They resorted to pumping water directly to their customers from the Tennessee River. It was unfiltered and untreated and would remain so for years. But it wasn't the quality of the water that ended private ownership of the water utility. Instead, it was the public's unhappiness with what they paid for that water. The city took over the waterworks in 1909 and in 1927 put a new facility in operation to filter and treat the water. The manufacture, sale, and distribution of gas became a Knoxville business on the Tennessee Riverbank in 1854. It powered a small number of gas lights in downtown. But the history of operating any private utility in Knoxville seems never without misfortune. First, the Union Army dismantled the gas facility during the Civil War. Then it was swept away by a flood in 1867, and finally, torn apart by a battle between stockholders. The business held on, but was a struggling concern well into the 20th century when the city acquired it. Electrical power was the last utility to be developed, but it was the genesis of the Knoxville Utilities Board. The first demonstration of electric lights in Knoxville came in the Christmas season of 1885. 34 streetlights supplied with electricity from a coal-fired generating plant on Gay Street were viewed with wonder by hundreds. Before long, there were 2 competing power companies. Both companies also operated streetcar businesses. In 1897, a riot began with a dispute about rights-of-way for streetcar tracks. Both the mayor and a president of one of the power companies were arrested in the melee. Eventually, the electric power business was consolidated under one company and was known as the Tennessee Public Service Company. But all was not well. The Depression of the 1930s made money scarce. People were unhappy with the high rates for electrical power. In 1932, city officials began to discuss buying the power company or building their own. A year later, in 1933, the creation of the Tennessee Valley Authority promised cheap electrical power. At the time, TVA would not sell its power to private companies, but would sell it to municipalities. The city jumped at the chance. Tennessee Public Service Company fought such a move, both on the public relations front and in the court. The 2 newspapers in town chose different sides in the fight. The court battles lasted 4 years. In the end, Tennessee Public Service Company agreed to sell its holdings to the city. Knoxville was the first large city ever to receive TVA power. While Knoxville was happy to get access to cheaper electricity, the city did not want to take on the complexity of running a power utility. The city charter was amended to create a truly independent board to manage both water and power. Written by City Attorney Warren Kennerly, this amendment became a model for cities throughout the country. The first meeting of the newly created board, then called the Electric Power and Water Board, was on March 14, 1939. Every member of that first board was a businessman with no experience in the utility industry. Their mandate was to make sure the utility ran in a business-like manner. Bruce Anderson is the current chairman of the board.
It's a business in a different sense in that we don't own the business. We don't have stockholders who are expecting a profit. The community is our stockholders. The community owns KUB. And so we have to be aware, first and foremost, of our customer, just like any other business, I guess, ought to be.
The board appointed Max C. Bartlett as the acting general manager. Bartlett was the obvious choice. As a private engineering consultant, he had performed cost estimates for both operation and distribution of the proposed city power system. Without delay, 3 separate bureaus were created: power, water, and accounts, and everyone went to work. A rural electrification program once again boomed. The city gas system was taken over in 1945. Amid all the work, the name of the board was changed to Knoxville Utilities Board, KUB, complete with a logo of a bear cub on the utility bills, which were indeed lower. Upon Bartlett's death, Mark B. Whittaker took over in 1953. Whittaker had been superintendent of the Water Bureau.
Mark Whittaker is the leader of all times at this company. Mark Whittaker controlled the company, and he ran a flat organization. I mean, he talked to anybody and gave instructions. He didn't bother going through the channels, but he believed in a strong work ethic.
He was very likely the last tobacco-chewing general manager in KUB history, but he was, above all, effective and visionary. Downtown storefronts were ablaze with appeals to buy and use electrical appliances and all the elements in KUB's product line. A main office building for KUB was selected and upgraded. Among other functions, it housed the management team, which was memorable to a young 18-year-old.
And I do remember Mr. Hoskins telling me, he said, now, you go over to 5th Avenue where the water department is and you report to this person. And he says, let me give you some advice. Don't ever come back down here again, because if you do, it's going to be a bad thing. And he was telling me, don't get in trouble.
Whittaker foresaw the future demand for more power. He searched for a place to house the growing number of crews. In 1965, the board approved the purchase of a rural tract on Middlebrook Pike.
Of course, it had vegetation and trees and rocks showing it, on top of the ground and this kind of thing, but it was, looked like it had a lot of prospects, and you have no idea what you're going to do. So you start talking to them and talk to anybody that else that will have any influence on the thing, and eventually you get idea enough in your head that you can put it down on paper and begin to discuss it with them.
KUB was growing to meet the demand. As the utilities grew, so did the corporate culture, especially at the employee level.
I worked with people who, had a high school diploma, but KUB would help them through college and all that.
They saw something in me that I didn't see. And through some of the struggles, KUB gave me some direction, some leadership, and some mentors to look at and to follow.
The friendships and the relationships that I have made at KUB are by far and away the strongest relationships I've ever had in my life.
That I was placed here, part-time through an employment agency. I enjoyed the work, I enjoyed the people, I enjoyed the atmosphere and the culture. It was very much a family back then. So yeah, I made it known that I would like to stay, and it worked out.
The closeness of field crews and the work they performed left an impression on each generation of workers.
I remember the first pole I climbed, right off of Washington Pike, Tom We called him Long Tom. He's the one got me on the pole and showed me how to do it.
KUB became a visible part of community events. Whittaker's retirement in 1971 signaled the closing of an era. The first generation of KUB managers and workers were beginning to leave, and they had left their mark.
They came out of the Depression generation, WW2 generation, so they were hardworking, very appreciative of what they got, had worked physically hard in their careers, had seen jobs get more technical and improved, pay improved.
One of the guys that got me on, or helped me get on, he had been here a long time. He used to put the pipe in just like Dwayne said, the pipe, shovel. So it was still a lot of those type guys here when I came. And they was different, you know.
And there's certain things about all of them I can remember. You know, I've worked for a lot of them. And, you know, I can't pick out one that I didn't learn something from.
Charles H. Chile Dean was the next GM. The energy crisis of the 1970s prompted TVA to raise rates many times, and KUB had to pass them on. Dean's response was to look for efficiencies and to do it fast.
Good man to work for, also a man of a few words. If you wanted to communicate with him, you had what you had to say and you got it done, because he wasn't going to hang around for a long time on any subject.
Staff size was reduced, yet there were no layoffs. Instead, retirees and others who left were not replaced. Crews were reduced in size, but advances in equipment technology allowed them to continue to be productive. But the fact was, many customers were hit hard by the ever-increasing cost of energy. Programs were added to help homeowners insulate their houses and use power more efficiently. Edwin Hoskins, who would become the general manager when Dean left for TVA, suggested a program to help customers with the new higher rates. A social worker was hired to counsel customers.
I think KUB was the second in the nation to have a customer counselor, and the first in the whole South. There are a lot of people out there in bad situations that needed counseling, that needed help.
Today, KUB's interaction with customers who need help with their bills has grown significantly.
I may get calls with someone with a dire emergency that just cannot pay their bill right now because of certain circumstances. So you never know what to expect. Just be ready to listen and make sure we are giving them our full attention so we can understand what they need to try to satisfy that.
Project Help was also one of Hoskins's initiatives.
So we saw a need to establish a program where customers could contribute to a fund that would 100% be used to help people with their heating and cooling.
Under Hoskins' leadership, the number of employees also continued to drop. For a time, the last utility to come under the management of KUB was Knoxville's suffering wastewater treatment system. KUB had turned down the operation as it was on the brink financially.
When it was operated by City Council, when there was additional funds needed, rather than politically raising rates, they would issue bonds, raise money.
Mayor Kyle Testerman pushed the limits of KUB's charter.
Kyle looked at us and said, the most important thing is that you're going to take the sewer department, while I'm mayor this time, on your terms or my terms.
In 1986, by almost a 2-to-1 margin, city voters approved of the transfer of wastewater treatment to KUB.
It was bankrupt, beyond bankrupt, and it took many, many years to get out of that. So it's been a financial headache all the way through, but it's been the best interest of the community.
In 1987, 128 new workers were new KUB employees.
You know, it's been a big change, but it was a good change. I mean, I don't think we would have all had as many opportunities. You know, it was just a smaller organization, like I said, being with the city.
They've really changed our safety program, and it's better for us.
Bringing the wastewater plants up to standard was not the only challenge of the 1980s. A building boom after the 1982 World's Fair brought more demand for power and gas.
The system had around 15,000 customers.
when I came to KUB, and when I left, there were over 80,000. Had tremendous growth.
Growth was rapid, and KUB management and crews learned new ways to meet the demand and find a new respect for each other in the process.
You knew when you went on the job site that the people were there, they were trained, and they were anxious to get the job done right.
You have a job to do, but there's so much other stuff going on around you that the guy working right beside you, you know, he has to do his job because your life may be in his hands and like his and yours.
Larry A. Fleming was the next manager, the position now called president and CEO.
He also was a near financial genius himself, quite frankly.
In the 90s, deregulation of the gas industry prompted many to believe the same thing would happen to all public utilities.
Fleming was looking much further ahead than others.
Fleming would act decisively in order to make KUB both more efficient and competitive. The 60-year-old bureau system was dropped. Field crews and work processes were combined throughout the utility. KUB now operated as a single business, not one company with separate divisions.
People had to sort of adapt, but it was good for everyone.
Naturally, close-knit employee groups felt the change. But new work relationships were developed and progress continued. KUB customers were largely unaware of any change at the utility. Such is the testament to the dedication and sense of purpose in KUB employees. Fleming, who died rather unexpectedly in 2003, will also be remembered for his initiative to move KUB's offices on Gay Street to an historic but badly run-down building known as the Millers Building.
The roof leaked. You had to be careful not to fall through the floors. And I told him it was an impossible task, and I thought he was crazy. The architect laid the plans out, Johnson Gay, and did the work. I just got to oversee some of it representing KUB. The Millers Building was the cherry on top of the pie.
The transformation of the Millers Building was a watershed moment for the entire downtown and signaled a reinvigoration of the area. In the first days of KUB, customer expectations were modest. It was a wonderful luxury to have a refrigerator or a washing machine. If power was lost, it was inconvenient but did not stop daily life. That simply isn't the case anymore. KUB's state-of-the-art operations center monitors the system 24 hours a day to facilitate the fixes.
You're trying to figure out just from what you lost where the problems might be and who needs to answer them.
But when harsh weather lights up the screens in the operations control room, there's another level of concentration that becomes apparent.
Back to normal.
The public safety of our people is paramount, and that is forefront in everything you do.
For the crews in the field, the response to emergency situations is surprising.
It's an exciting job, it is. On the leaks, you know, most common sense tells you to get out of there, leave that area as quick as you can. And the gas leak trucks, they go to it and try to get the situation under control.
Absolutely, the adrenaline is flowing. I mean, as soon as you take the initial call, you know, you get excited.
You work at a pace, you don't outthink yourself. And that way you don't get yourself in trouble.
Now we have a giant event. We have the entire company basically shuts down and they go into a support mode for the overhead folks to go out and do the job.
There have been and will continue to be challenges to overcome. The public's daily expectation is for no interruptions. Employees are trained on all levels to function in such an environment.
People come to KUB knowing that they're going to work 24-hour days sometimes. It's a 24-hour operation, and they make sacrifices personally, but they do it because they know this is what our community needs, and it's why KUB exists.
Mentha Roach became the first woman to hold the leading management position at KUB in 2003. She, along with COO Bill Elmore, sees the biggest challenge is upgrading the infrastructure that 75 years brings.
We understand what the needs are for replacing infrastructure, but it's very, very expensive. So I would say the overarching issue we have is how we balance the needs of our system, investing in our system, with the customer's ability to pay the bills for that.
The initiative is called Century 2.
The objective there is for us to evaluate all of our major assets to determine what kind of condition they're in, how old they are, what their expected useful life is, and what the appropriate replacement schedules and timeframes are. And this isn't something that's going to be done quickly. It took generations to build the system. The system has aged, and it'll take generations to rebuild it.
As the service area grows denser and services layered one upon another, interaction with the community becomes more complex. That is the reality of operating a utility in the 21st century. The complexity of the system has grown many times. Customers on all levels have higher expectations of service. The skill to build and operate an exceptional public service utility remains a never-ending task. As it turns out, the expertise can be handed down from one generation to the next. But the future will put all of that to the test. Meeting new demands and learning new skills is familiar territory for the people of KUB. Throughout its history, KUB has faced the future with a resolute determination to succeed. By all measurements, they most assuredly have.